financial problems, elder law, tax problems, business matters, divorce, personal injury, bankruptcy, your life, your reality. Life is complicated. There is the law and there is reality. Welcome to Law and Reality, sponsored by Thav Gross. Now here's your host, Ken Gross.
Welcome to this segment of Law and Reality. In this segment, our tax guru, Jenny Lingle, is going to help guide us through how to survive a business tax problem. A lot of times we talk about individual tax problems, but I thought we would do something a little bit different. It's a little bit more complicated because it's a business tax problem, and it leads to an individual tax problem, which we'll talk about in the next segment of Law and Reality. But I thought this was a good little project to do. So David Einstandig, Brian Small, Jenny Lingle, these are the facts, and then we'll take it from there. The fictitious business, and I'm saying fictitious because I don't want anyone who has this name calling up saying, why are you putting our name out there? And I didn't find anyone with a local name of this, but it's Cutter Landscaping and Snow Service is the fictitious name of our business. The owner is Bert Cutter. He's been in business 20 years. He does residential and commercial landscaping and snow service. These are the assets of the business right now. He has accounts receivable of $200,000. He's got equipment and vehicles that he estimates the fair market value to be around $200,000. He's got a long customer list of all his customers that he services and has worked for and done business with for many years. He's got a telephone number, a website, all those intangibles that go with a business. He doesn't own his own building. He rents office and warehouse space. That's basically the assets. Now let's talk about his liabilities. Here's where his problems come in. He owes Bank of Paradise. Is there a Bank of Paradise that you know of, Brian?
I have no idea, but that's a great name.
I thought it was a good name for a bank. You like that one, David?
I think you could come up with some twists on the Paradise, but let's get going.
Okay. Bank of Paradise has a first lien on all assets. They're a secured creditor, which we talked about in the last television segment of the show on security interests. They're owed $175,000. Now let's get to his problem. He owes the IRS $350,000, and they have filed a tax lien. And he owes our favorite state, the state of Michigan, $125,000 in taxes, and they have filed a tax lien. On top of that, he's taken advantage of all of those business credit cards that get sent to you in the mail, and you sign for them personally on your own behalf, but they come issued in the name of your business. And he has $100,000 of business credit card debt.
So all of the trailers and the trucks and everything, that's all secured by the bank. We'll assume that they're listed on title. The bank has everything locked up. Is that your facts?
Yeah. So he also has a few other vehicles that are titled directly to Chase Bank or to GMAC Alley for finance.
Okay.
He owes another total of $175,000 to the bank, and everything else that's not titled to any vehicle that's not titled to a bank is all leaned in favor of First Bank of Paradise.
So it's a typical scenario that we would see come through the office. So
yeah, I called it First Bank of Paradise, but it's actually Bank of Paradise. I don't want to confuse the name. Now, the tax liability for the IRS in the state of Michigan is for payroll taxes. And we're going to come back to that in a minute. Now, Bert is married to a darling woman named Betty, Bert and Betty Cutter, and I want to just give you the background there. Bert is the guarantor to Paradise Bank on the bank loan. Betty is not. Betty does not own any interest in Cutter Landscape, and she's not She comes into the office and helps out on occasion, but she is not actively employed. She's not an officer, a director, or a shareholder of the company. They are both concerned about the tax liability.
Is Betty a signatory on the checking account?
She is not. Betty has $100,000 in savings of her own money. Bert has $100,000 in his 401k. They're worried about, are they going to lose that money? Uh-oh, we're losing Brian. You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. It's critical to this segment of the show is Jenny. So if Brian, we lose you, the show must go on. That's how it works.
I can leave and go home.
That's not an option. They have a home, nice house, owned by the two of them as tenancy by the entireties, the normal way a husband and wife own a house in Michigan. Fair market value on that house is $300,000. The mortgage is, fair market value on the house is $400,000.
There you go.
The mortgage is $300,000. So there's $100,000 of equity.
And they have 2 kids, Bobby and Billy.
They probably do, but I didn't put them into the.
Bert and Betty got to have Bobby and Billy.
Well, Bert and Betty, if you're watching the TV version of Law and Reality, Bert from Sesame Street, and Betty's also a character on Sesame Street. So those are our visual. If you want to visualize what Bert and Betty look like, visualize.
You've been hanging around
Bert
with your. You've been
and
hanging
Betty.
around with your grandson too much. Well, you can't
he's
hang out
not
with
yet-
your grandson
he's not yet
too
into
much,
Sesame
but
Street, yeah. No,
nevertheless, yeah. Or you've been watching Sesame Street too much.
I was always a Bert and Ernie fan when my kids were little. I mean, that was before Barney and Rubble and whatever else you have now. Current issue. Here's where this Barney Rubble was in the Flintstones.
Yes,
and
we know.
That was my era.
That was your era.
Okay.
That was the 50s.
Here's the issue. Everything was going normal, even though the tax liens were there. The bank's been getting paid regularly. Bert's been kind of ignoring the tax issue. And an IRS collection officer waltzes into their offices with her business card and asks to see Bert. Bert's not there. The collection officer leaves her card and asks the receptionist to please have Mr. Cutter call me at this number. Bert comes into the office. The receptionist gives him the card, gives him the message. Bert is upset. He calls Stavros. He's now sitting in our waiting room, and he's here to be counseled with Betty on how to address this problem. And he's concerned. He wants to know, am I going to lose my business? Am I going to lose my house? You got to help me. So when we come back from the break, we're going to break this down and analyze and figure out what to do.
It's devastating, the effects of debt and foreclosure on you and your family. There is a solution.
Worth Ave Gross, our firm will solve your problem. Some fear the word bankruptcy, but in reality, it's a strategy to save your home and to eliminate debt. If you're in financial trouble, timing is critical. You need to take action now. We've been saving homes and eliminating debt for over 33 years.
Call Fav Gross 888-235-HELP.
Every family has the family meeting, and we all know what that means. Dad's got dementia. What are we going to do? What's the care plan that the family has in place? Usually they don't, or they struggle with a care plan. When you go home tonight and you talk to your tax person and you talk to your financial person, say, what's the plan that you have in place? And as soon as they don't give you an answer, give me a call, because I can do it for you.
Tax problems are major problems. Don't let the IRS levy your wages and seize your assets. There is a solution.
Worth Ave Gross, our firm will solve your problem.
If you're behind on your taxes and owe money to the IRS, call Fav Gross.
We've been solving tax problems for 32 years. We stop wage levies, resolve unfiled returns, and obtain the best possible settlements.
Call Fav Gross today, 888-235-HELP.
A lifetime of hard work. If you don't have the right plan in place, you can lose your home, your savings, and more. And you didn't come this far to lose everything. Simasco Law wants you to know that laws are changing. Today, the average cost of nursing home care is $85,000 a year. With proper planning, we can help protect your life savings and get you the Medicaid and nursing home benefits you deserve.
How much can you afford to lose? Call Samasco Law today.
If you're retired and in a financial crisis, there is a way out.
It pains me when I see a retired couple exhaust their savings by paying credit card bills and for a home hopelessly underwater.
Thav Gross specializes in helping retired people in financial crisis.
You just can't keep paying until you're broke. You need to address the problem now.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
We're Thav Gross. Our firm will solve your problem. All right, welcome back. All right, so we've got Cutter Landscaping and Snow Service. Jenny, Bert, and Betty are in the waiting room. They're now in our office. We're meeting with them. We're getting the facts. Here's the first thing I think that we're asking about, because they're just here now. We want to know how involved Betty is in the business right off the bat. And why is that? What are the things that we're worried about?
Well, the first thing that we're worried about is whether or not the Internal Revenue Service could determine that Betty is also responsible for what they call the trust fund. We know the business is liable for 100% of the federal taxes. However, when they go to assess Bert, who likely will be assessed, they're only going to assess him for the trust fund, which is the portion that the employees had, their withholding and their FICA.
Oh, yeah. I want to back up a little bit. Okay, so you have, first of all, we've got this $350,000 liability for federal payroll taxes and $175,000 for the state. And right off the bat, we're wondering, we know the company's liable for it. We know they filed a lien against the company, but we also know that Paradise Bank has a first lien that comes ahead of the IRS in the state. But we're worried about who's going to have personal liability for these unpaid payroll taxes. Now, just to make it so everybody's listening and watching knows, the payroll taxes this isn't income taxes. This is the money that's withheld from employees' paychecks that is not turned over to the government for your federal tax deposits that the employer is required to make. It's the amount of the withholding from the employee's check for FICA, Medicare, and federal withholding tax, plus your employer is always obligated to make a matching contribution of FICA and Medicare. That's the total amount of the federal payroll taxes that they're behind. Under the law, under the Trust Fund Recovery Penalty, acronym TFRP, the IRS will assess against responsible officers of the company, responsible people of the company, the trust fund recovery, which is the money withheld from the employee's check for FICA, Medicare, and federal withholding tax. It doesn't include the employer's matching amount.
Here's the public policy and the concept behind it, just to make it simple. Everybody understands that getting a W-2 or a paycheck, that their payroll taxes come out. Bottom line is the employer makes a decision, and they're holding the employee's money, and they are charged with the responsibility and the fiduciary obligation to take the employee's money and pay it over to the government. And the law says if you violate that, and it wasn't your money to begin with, and you did not pay it over to the government, you violated a trust. That's the concept. So it's not the full boat.
It's not the full boat, but it's a very serious penalty because trust fund liability, payroll tax liabilities are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So right off the bat, we're wondering, we know Bert's got the problem because Bert is the owner of the company. He's writing the checks. Betty, we find out, like we said before, she's just comes in and helps out. She's not a check signer. Brian asked that question. She's not an officer. We really, right off the bat, pretty well know Betty's not a target for the trust fund recovery.
I disagree, Ken. I think Betty will be brought in for the trust fund recovery penalty interview, and how she answers those questions will determine whether or not the Internal Revenue Service determines she's responsible. Now, if the revenue officer, because their threshold of determining whether she's responsible is lower than at the appeals, decides that, you know what, Betty may have had some control here and assesses her, she'll receive a letter that says that they're proposing to assess the trust fund against against her. And at that point, we would file what they call a protest letter and be assigned to appeals officer to argue why Betty should not be held responsible. And the reason we want to do this is we don't want Betty's future income, Betty's savings,
Her
or Betty's
$100,000
equity,
she's got in the bank.
and her equity in the home to be subject to IRS seizures and levies.
Now, given the facts that I laid out at the beginning, do you think we would prevail on appeals, even if the collection officer went
Yes.
after her? Because she's not a check signer. She was just a casual helper out in the office. She wasn't controlling the business.
I think we would prevail at the appeals level.
And I know we're moving on to the alternatives, but it is absolutely critical that if the IRS officer walks into your business, that whatever you say at that very moment could rise and fall as to what Jenny just said. Go ahead.
So the answer to that is you shouldn't say anything. You need to call and get in and get representation
I
right
usually
away.
tell
You can't
people
trust
to
the
just
government.
if you have a tax problem, you should kind of at that point know there's a couple of law firms you might call and just politely say, you know what, I'll have my attorney contact you. Thank you, and escort them out.
All right, so here's where we're at. We figured out we don't think on an ultimate basis Betty will have a problem, so we think her $100,000 is pretty safe. We know Bert's got the problem. And we also know Cutter Landscaping has the problem, so we have to figure out how are we going to address this problem. Would we be able to get an installment payment plan for the business to continue operating with that? And we also have the state of Michigan out there with, in fact, let's step back for a second. The state of Michigan liability, the $175,000, it's not a trust fund situation. In the state situation, if you're a responsible party, and officers of the company are typically deemed to be responsible parties, you're liable personally for the full amount. So in this case, we know Bert's going to be on the hook for $175,000 with the state, and he's going to be on the hook for the trust fund portion of the $350,000 to the feds.
It's actually 125, but go ahead.
What's
The
125?
state tax lien's 125. Just want to keep it consistent. The bank has a 175.
I think it's 175 on some of the other slides that we do, but we'll have to see.
All right. That's a
You
different
never know how
story.
much the state. You never know. You never can be quite sure
Interest.
about the state of Michigan. They're very
Interest.
slippery when it comes to those taxes.
Okay.
All right. So, what do we do? Can we get an installment payment for this much debt?
Now, what I hate to say about this, Ken, is usually when an individual comes, my first question is, who is the revenue officer assigned to your case? So that's a tricky question. There are some that are much more aggressive than others. So the first is, it may be possible to get an installment agreement without having to, at this point, liquidate all of Bert's assets. It depends whether the revenue officer wants to pull Bert in at the same point. Some will allow us to file for an appeal for Bert and close out the business on an installment agreement. But what typically will happen is that they'll pull both Bert's liability and the business's liability together, and until Bert liquidates his value in the house and his 401k and any assets that he may have, they won't even consider an installment agreement for the business.
Now we're going to add one other fact to the pool, and then we'll resolve it when we come back after the bank. Up until now, Bank of Paradise is getting their payments. But Bank of Paradise finds out about the tax liens, and now they're concerned, and they're calling the loan. We'll be back after the break.
Is the debt piling up? Struggling to get by?
It's all about preserving future income. Bankruptcy is one option. When it's right, it's the least costly, most effective way to save your home, eliminate a second mortgage, and wipe out credit card debt. But you need to address the problem now.
We help people with bankruptcy. Call the experts.
Worth Ave Gross. Our firm will solve your problem.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP. If you're retired and in a financial crisis, there is a way out.
It pains me when I see a retired couple exhaust their savings by paying credit card bills and for a home hopelessly underwater.
Thav Gross specializes in helping retired people in financial crisis.
You just can't keep paying until you're broke. You need to address the problem now.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
Worth Ave Gross. Our firm will solve your problem.
Carrying too much debt? Resolve your debt. Call Thav Gross.
You don't need to be broke, and you don't need to hit rock bottom. If you have income and you're struggling with debt, dump it. Think about the next 10 or 20 years. If you do what the banks tell you, you'll have nothing to retire with. There is a solution.
Don't waste your future. Call Fav Gross. We're experts at eliminating credit card debt. 888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
A lifetime of hard work. If you don't have the right plan in place, you can lose your home, your savings, and more. And you didn't come this far to lose everything. Samasco Law wants you to know that laws are changing. Today, the average cost of nursing home care is $85,000 a year. With proper planning, we can help protect your life savings and get you the Medicaid and nursing home benefits you deserve.
How much can you afford to lose? Call Samasco Law today.
Tax problems are major problems. Don't let the IRS levy your wages and seize your assets. There is a solution.
Worth Ave Gross, our firm will solve your problem.
If you're behind on your taxes and owe money to the IRS, call Fav Gross.
We've been solving tax problems for 32 years. We stop wage levies, resolve unfiled returns, and obtain the best possible settlements.
Call Fav Gross today, 888-235-HELP.
So the bank called the loan on Cutter Landscaping, and they're in first position. Before we tell you how that plays into the scene, we have important announcements to make. Tuesday, April 28th, seminar coming up, The Smartest Way to Minimize Debt. That's at our offices at Thav Gross in Bingham Farms, 7 to 8:30 p.m. We're going to address individual issues, business issues, tax issues. It all comes down to this: preserving future income for you and your family, figuring out the smartest way to minimize debt. If you're carrying too much debt, credit card debt, $70,000, $80,000, $40,000, $50,000 of credit card debt at 20% interest is $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 a year of interest you're paying. You're wasting your retirement. You need to figure out how to get rid of that debt the fastest way, so that instead of giving that money to the banks, you put the money in the bank and you save it so you've got some money to live off of when you get to be older and you're trying to retire and you're trying to live to 105 like we were talking about the other day. That's from 7 to 8:30. You want to sign up, go to lawandreality.com or thavgross.com. We've got our free reports, ssifreereport.com on Social Security by Pat Samasco. Reg X, How to Save Your Home, The Hidden Secrets. Go to regxhomesaver.com. Want to thank our sponsors, Thav Gross, Samasco Law. Keep in mind, the whole essence of the seminars is the idea of preserving future income. Now, back to Bert and Betty and Cutter Landscape. Paradise Bank calls the loan. They're the first secured creditor. This means they have the right to force a sale of the assets in order to get the money and apply it on the debt. Now, if we go and we investigate this thing and we come in our office and we're looking at our options, we need to know how much are the assets worth? What could we really get for these assets if we went and sold them? So what we would typically do is we would order our own appraisal of the equipment. We would call one of several appraisers in the area and ask them to come in and do a forced sale liquidation appraisal and fair market value so that we know how to negotiate with the bank and that we know how to negotiate with IRS. Now, if we did that and we had it appraised, let's assume the numbers came back and said on forced liquidation, the assets are worth about $50,000, fair market value, $150,000. We now need to come up with a strategy for Bert and Betty to keep them in business. If we just let evolution go forward, the bank is going to shut them down, take the assets, apply the money on the bank debt, and then sue Bert for the deficiency. And the IRS and the state is going to go after Bert for the taxes because they're not going to get anything, correct, out of the assets of the business.
So what you're saying, in essence, Ken, is that we have a situation which we see all the time where the bank is in priority and the bank debt exceeds whatever the value of the assets of the company are. And even though there's tax liabilities, and even though there may be trust fund tax liabilities, all of those tax liabilities would be after the bank who's in a first position.
They get their
and
money
we need
first.
we need to say, how can we use that to our advantage?
Right.
We need to have it as a tool.
Now, I see two ways. Brian, see if you agree with me. One way would be we form a new company and we buy the assets from the company and we request the bank to release their lien, and then we have Jenny go to the feds and the state and we ask them to release their liens.
Where's the money come from?
Well, Betty's got $100,000. Bert's got $100,000 in his 401k. Suppose Bert cashes out his 401k, nets himself after tax withholding from the 401k $75,000. Betty takes her whole $100,000. We form NewCo. NewCo then comes in and makes an offer to the bank and says, "We'll cash you out for what's the bank owed? $175,000."
Yes.
Suppose we offer the bank $150,000. We don't have to offer them the full amount. We say to them, for sale liquidation value is $50,000. So we'll give you $150,000. We want the receivables. We want the phone number. We want the equipment. We'll write you a check for $150,000. Bank says, okay, we'll release our lien. We'll take the $150,000. Bank's not going to let Bert off the hook on the $25,000 yet, although we're trying to get the bank to do that. The bank says no. My question is, Jenny, can you talk the state and the feds into releasing their lien? Seem as though the value of what's being bought is we're paying fair value for it.
Well, the first thing that they would do is we would look at the appraisal. They would make sure that the bank is actually in the first position, and then we would have to deal with the lien release unit with the Internal Revenue Service and the special lien release unit with the Michigan Department of Treasury. Once they see that the fair market value of all of these things is really only $150,000, and you have to make sure that you've accounted for every asset that new company is going to buy, then they will say that they will allow the sale to go through and say that their interest is zero. One thing that you have to make sure of, though, is with these accounts receivable, if NewCo is going to go into the same type of business, which the way you've set this up they are, you have to have a start date for the new business. And any monies that come in that were due before that start date belong to the old company.
Well, no, I'm going to have them buy the receivables with it.
That's going to be a difficult thing to do.
If not, then we have to do the separation.
It's going to be very difficult to sell the receivables.
Does it matter that Betty's the wife? Will they let it occur?
Well, in this situation, because it really is for fair market value, they could bring up the possibility of whether or not it's an arm's length transaction. But I think this seems like a pretty above board transaction that we'll be able to
and
get
if
accomplished.
not, if we couldn't get them to agree that way, we could also buy the bank's note position, and then we could foreclose the assets as if we were the bank. That's just another way of accomplishing it. But here's the scene now. Let's assume it works. We now have the new Cutter Landscaping. Let's assume we have it owned by Betty, or we have it owned by, what were the name of the two sons you came up with,
Bobby
David?
and Billy.
Bobby and Billy. It's not owned by Bert. And now the question is, what about Bert? Is Bert home free and clear? I don't think so. Bert still has credit card debt, $100,000. He's got the tax liability, federal and state. And he's also being chased by Paradise Bank for the $25,000. The next segment of Law and Reality, we're going to address how we solve the problem for Bert.